Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Now, a former Navy commander with a master's degree in national security affairs who served as a commanding officer and aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is not someone you typically expect to see on an episode of the No BS Spiritual Book Club. But when you learn that former Navy commander is also a medium, a transformation teacher, a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and the author of 13 books, 6 best-selling hemi-sync recordings, and YouTube videos reaching millions of viewers, you know there has to be a pretty interesting story there. And indeed, there is. So let's welcome founder of The Awakened Way, producer of the Daily Way Inspirational Messages, and host of the Messages of Hope podcast, Suzanne Geisemann. Suzanne Geisemann, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie, and hi, everybody.
You've probably answered this question many times before. Exactly how long was that road that you took from serving as a commanding officer to serving on the faculty of the Shift Network and teaching people how to live a consciously connected and divinely guided life?
From the time I retired from the Navy until I became faculty with the Shift Network was about 13 years, but all kinds of things were happening and blossoming in those 13 years.
I am sure of that.
Yes.
So where did this journey, the spiritual journey, start for you?
It started on 9/11 when I was in the last aircraft in U.S. airspace with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of the U.S. military. That up close and personal view, flying over Manhattan, then returning to the Pentagon and stepping over pieces of jet engine in the grass, looking at the gaping hole in our office building that we had just left hours earlier, really started me asking questions like, why are some people in the wrong place at the wrong time? I didn't get satisfactory answers, so I just went back to my normal way of living until life caught up with me in the very unexpected death of my stepdaughter, Susan, who was a sergeant in the Marines, struck and killed by lightning. And I could no longer ignore at that point that there are some questions I need answers to. And so it was my search for Susan's spirit, which I just knew intuitively had to still exist when I looked at her body at the funeral. I just knew there is something that enlivens the body. She can't be gone, and I'm going to find her. So that became my new mission. And that mission has now expanded from serving my country to serving humanity, which is so rewarding.
I can imagine. So did you have no inklings in your childhood, no little experiences, nothing at all?
Nothing. I see now that I was intuitive, especially when I served as the chairman's aide, because you had to know what he wanted before he asked for it. So, but was that just forward thinking? Was that thinking ahead, or was it intuition? I feel probably a little bit more of the left brain side, but no idea there was a spirit world. Never saw spirits, which is why I love teaching now, because number one, people pay attention because I'm not woo-woo, and they trust me. And they say, well, if she can do it and I've never seen spirits, then maybe I can too. And that is the truth. Everybody can learn.
What about your former comrades and colleagues? I mean, what do they think?
There are only a very few who are very skeptical, one of them being the general who I served. And the rest are just so open to it and intrigued, because most people have a basic belief that there is more, and they're just afraid to talk about it. So those who are no longer in uniform, who I've kept in touch with, just think it's fascinating and want to know more.
Well, you've always been a great reader, and you talk about the fact that when you and your husband lived on your boat for many years, you took 200 books on board with you, because that was the pre-Kindle days. And when you actually stopped living on the boat and you took the books off, what was it? The boat was about 5 inches higher.
We call it the waterline. You could see on the boat where the water was before the books came off, and afterwards it came up 5 inches. You know, most sailors would be appalled because you try to keep your boat light so you go faster. When it came to books, we didn't care. That they're sacred to us, and we just love reading. We don't even watch TV at all to this day. So it was a natural, and Kindle has been a big saver in that regard.
Oh, absolutely, I'll say.
Yeah.
So what kind of books were you reading before 9/11?
Oh, what a good question. Oh, a lot of novels, certainly at the time. I really was interested in things about metaphysics, but didn't dive in too much. Personal transformation books, for sure. That started in my 30s. I was just really, even before, trying to figure out why I'd always had a lifetime, well, since a teenager, of craving food. Food was my drug of choice when I would be bored or hungry, tired, all those things that cause us to run for the refrigerator. So I always felt there was something that I could make better in myself. So probably self-transformational books.
And what was the first spiritual book that you read?
Well, that would be the first one that really opened my eyes, that's on my list, is called Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain.
Yes.
And even the name, at the time, I had no idea that Shakti was Sanskrit, and it stands for life force energy. To me, that was just such a unique name. I wasn't into meditation, but I could get into visualization. That's what sports players do, right? They visualize success. But her book was so much more, and just opened me up to new ways of thinking and thinking outside the box. And so it had never occurred to me to ask of something beyond my awareness, what causes these food cravings in myself. I just kept saying, what's wrong with me? Why can't I stop running to the refrigerator even when it makes me miserable? It was just this generic wondering till I read Shakti's book and the advice about intuition and asking. And so I sat down one day and I said, all right, I'm going to ask. I'm asking, not knowing who I was talking to, why do I have these cravings? And the answer was not immediate, but it was within 24 hours. Suddenly I had to pick up a yellow legal pad and just started writing all these insights that flooded me. And it went right back to my teenage years when I had a whole bunch of really bad acne and wireframe glasses and must have felt awfully homely and insecure. And I was shown it was my way of feeling better. And then all these insights that followed came in. And it was only because that book guided me to actually ask. And I realized I connected to something beyond the Suzanne story. That was the beginning.
Who did you think you were connecting to?
I had no idea. I certainly didn't think it was a spirit guide. It was decades before I believed and came to know that spirit guides are real. I didn't really even think about God. I grew up in a family with no religion. I was not raised in the church at all. We weren't even really encouraged to talk about God. In fact, discouraged from that. So I probably just chalked it up to some higher power, but Shakti left it very open-ended in that book. And I could embrace that we just trust that you will get insights if you do this practice.
Well, Shakti's book, which is Creative Visualization, Use the Power of Your Imagination to Create What You Want in Your Life, was published in 1978. And that is the first book on your list. The second book, Real Magic, Creating Miracles in Everyday Life, same theme, different author, Wayne Dyer, published in 1992. What did you find in Wayne's book?
A miracle mindset. I was always a positive thinker. I've always been enthusiastic about things that I'm interested in. In fact, my parents call it my enthusiasm. They even coined a word for it because I'm always pretty bubbly. Well, not quite always, but most of the time. And Wayne's book just caused me to think even bigger. And this idea of creating miracles with your thoughts was really new to me when I read that. It was the first of his books that I read. It's so funny because when I saw his name on the book and saw that he's the best-selling author of this book called Your Erroneous Zones, I misread it then, as I had every time before. I thought it was Your Erogenous Zones. And, that's some book about sex, and I'm not interested in that. And the laugh, the joke was on me because later I found out that it wasn't that at all. But real magic so spoke to me that I started giving it as gifts to other people because it was so transformational when you applied intention, which was a major theme of Wayne's, and belief and that miracle mindset. Miracles really did happen. But at the time, for me, where I was spiritually, this was still about 25, 30 years ago, that was all happening within this reality. I still didn't realize that we're tapping into a greater reality, a greater intelligence, a field from which those miracles arise. So it didn't matter just applying. It didn't matter that I didn't realize there's a greater reality. The processes and tools that he taught in that book worked. And that was just amazing to me.
Now, you said that Wayne actually came to your house for a reading, and he personally endorsed 2 of your books, and you stayed in touch for quite some time. So somewhere along the line, you read the book. Later on, you met Wayne. How did you come to meet Wayne?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I loved his book so much. Then I read everything he wrote, including, that's how I found out it was Erroneous Zones, because I went back and read that one. And many of his books in the latter part of his career were published by Hay House. So when I became an author and I wrote my first metaphysical book, I gave it to my agent and I said, yeah, you came up with this list of potential publishers, but send it to Hay House. I would love to have a Hay House book. And he'd never even heard of Hay House because he was not normally a spiritual book agent. And so I sat practicing the tools from way back reading Real Magic, and every day stated my affirmation, I am a Hay House author. That book got picked up by Hay House in record time, 2 weeks. They didn't even do the normal process. There was something about that book, they said, and I know what it was. I used the Real Magic on it. So once that goal was achieved, I said, well, we need to up the ante here. All right. I am on a first name basis with Wayne Dyer. That became my daily mantra now that I was a Hay House author. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just put it out there to the universe, and it came together so beautifully when I coincidentally, and there are no coincidences, met his sister-in-law who lived in my community in Florida. It was like I could hear the angels singing. Like I could see this coming. Next thing you know, she had signed up for a class I was teaching. And I just went up to her and I just said, I set a goal that I would one day be on a first name basis with your brother-in-law, Wayne Dyer. And that's the only seed I planted. And when he came to visit his brother and his sister-in-law, my friend there in Florida, she gave me a call. She said, Suzanne, Wayne's in town. Would you like to give him a reading? It was one of those moments. I have goosebumps remembering it. And you try to be calm, but you think, would I? And so he actually came to my house, which at the time, even to this day, it would be a big deal. But at the time, I really had to pull out all the stops to not be nervous and not let my ego go to my head. It was a beautiful session. He spent an hour and a half at the house talking with my husband, and thank goodness the session went very well for him. And he just willingly gave me a glowing endorsement for 2 subsequent books. And we would email back and forth using our first name. So there you go. The real magic really works.
Yeah. So what was the first book that you had published?
Well, my first metaphysical book is The Priest and the Medium. It was a biography of medium Anne Gaiman. I wrote it before I had any idea I would one day be a medium. I had just found through a medium who brought through our Susan that mediumship is real. And I had to tell the world, and having published already a book about conquering your cravings from the transformation in my life, thanks to Shakti, Gawain, and Wayne, it was The Priest and the Medium was my way of letting the world know mediumship is not crazy. It's real. Our loved ones are really right here. And writing The Priest and the Medium led me to meet other people that helped my abilities unfold. So it's all that web that we're part of.
Yeah. So how did you become a medium? When did you first, connect with somebody who was no longer here?
Well, because I wrote Anne Gaiman's biography, I met her next door neighbor, Janet Nohavec, a wonderful evidence-based medium, meaning we're not happy with airy-fairy messages like, oh, your loved one is right here and they love you so much and I see a beautiful white light around you. Mm-hmm. You have to give how they died, what they were like, what kind of work they did, the evidence. Can you imagine how that spoke to my left brain military side? So Janet Nohavec said, well, you wrote Anne's book. Will you write my biography? I agreed to do it because the hook for Janet was so clear. She was a former Catholic nun, now working as a medium. Well, in writing her book, I had to study her, learn all about her, follow her around. So I sat in the back of one of her classes. I had never been to a class on mediumship, but she taught these systems. This is how you connect. And I thought, wow, you can learn to do this? And suddenly she said, there's a spirit standing here. I'd like somebody to come up and apply what I just taught you. Suzanne, come up to the front. Sandie, I wanted a hole to open up in the floor so I could fall through it. I couldn't do that myself. But the Navy officer in me said, can do. I'm going to do. You call on me, I'll get up there. And I could not feel a presence, but I brought through evidence. There's a man here who died of cancer at age 70, and he was an engineer. And this woman in the class says, that would be my dad. And I thought I was just making it up until Janet brought through evidence about the same man, really good evidence. And she said, get some more, Suzanne. Next thing you know, I'm hearing twinkle toes and I'm seeing black patent leather shoes. And the girl in the room says, oh, my dad was a ballroom dancer and everybody called him Twinkle Toes. And I said, I can do this too. I can bring healing to people like that medium brought to our family when she showed us our Susan is here. And from there on, this has been my driving motive in my life, just to get better and better and help other people connect as well.
Well, then we should not be surprised at the title of your next book, which is The Afterlife Experiments, Breakthrough Scientific Evidence of Life After Death by Gary Schwartz.
Yes, I became so interested in learning more about the possible spirit world, which before I read that book, I didn't know if it existed. And now I guarantee everybody it exists. Death is not the end. I say this with total confidence from the preponderance of the evidence over the years. But at the time of Susan's funeral, we were devastated. I just wanted to know if what my heart told me when I looked at her body, that death is not the end. We had just a few minutes before getting on a plane to go back to our sailboat in Croatia to stop in a bookstore. I went to the New Age metaphysical books, spiritual books section, and I just looked at the titles. I need to find something about the afterlife. So of course, a book called The Afterlife Experiments jumped out at me. And when I read that subtitle about scientific experiments and evidence, this is the book, because I need evidence. And Dr. Schwartz's book interviewed 4 different mediums and talked about the double-blind, triple-blind experiments he did with them, and really showed me this can be scientifically shown to be real. And one of the mediums in that book was Anne Gaiman. That's how I learned about her. And Sandie, come to find out, she lived only 5 miles from the home we had left behind and rented out when we took off sailing on our boat for years. So because of Susan's death, we stopped the sailing, moved back into that house, and I met Anne Gaiman. It's all just meant to be. The connections came about. And then I end up connecting with Dr. Schwartz myself. He calls me out to the University of Arizona and puts me through these double and triple blinded tests. And I became one of his go-to mediums. And to this day, I'm working with him from time to time in experiments to help everybody use technology to connect across the veil.
Are you working with him on his experiments with the phone?
I do. I'm not in the technology side, but he has certain spirits across the veil who are helping. And
Yes.
so he has a team of his most trusted mediums who tune into those spirits to validate the information that they're using in the technology. It's really fascinating.
Do you think it's possible that one day we will be able to pick up the phone and speak to our dead loved ones?
I know it is possible from the what is showing up on the instrumentation now. It's undeniable, but I totally understand why he needs to have every T crossed and I dotted before he introduces it to the public, because there will most definitely be skepticism about that, understandably. But
yes.
I know from interacting with these spirits and getting the evidence from them that I just can't deny that they really are trying to help.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So book number 4, fabulous book, The Field, The Quest for the Secret Force of the Universe, Lynn McTaggart, 2003. What a great book.
Oh, yes. And just what I needed after Janet Nohavec pulled me to the front and said, you can do this. And I did it. I brought through a spirit. How is that possible? Where are these people? How come why don't we see them? All these questions going around in my head, and I couldn't explain it spiritually yet. At that point, I couldn't. So I went to the science side, and this quest for the secret force of the universe. Okay, it has to be a force of some kind. So what is it? And I dove into her book, and Sandie, I was a foreign language major, liberal arts major, never scientifically minded. And she dived into quantum physics so thoroughly, but just made it understandable if I read slowly. So I would go back and I'm highlighting and underlining. And now the experiments that are talked about in that book, some of them, the scientists have just now earned the Nobel Prize in Physics for those experiments. So the world is catching on to what Lynn McTaggart and others have known for a long time. There is this force that joins us all, and that's where the spiritual side comes in. Yeah.
Number 5, Stalk in the Wild Pendulum, on the Mechanics of Consciousness, by Israeli-American scientist, inventor, author, and mystic Itzhak Bentov, and also William Tiller, who wrote the preface, who was a man that I had the privilege of knowing. Just an incredible man.
I've met him as well, and brilliant mind, and one of those brave scientists who's not afraid to put it out there that there's more that science can't prove. Yes. But Itzhak Bentov was way ahead of his time and unfortunately passed in a plane crash in the 70s, or I would be just following his work to this day. It's such a little gem of a book, and very few people have heard of it. So I'm really grateful to you, Sandie, for this chance to get it out there. He explains very obtuse concepts in fun ways, with fun little hand drawings of little comical figures, and gives you little experiments in the book, like one where you can stare at your watch and get in an expanded state of consciousness, and suddenly the second hand stops. It's stunning. And it's like you're watching time, and suddenly time, I just did it. I stopped my second hand just like that for 3 seconds. So what really happened in that 3-second block where the second hand stopped, Bentov explains about time in ways that most people would never think to explain them. And he just opened me up to understanding how everything is the result of consciousness, and certainly not the brain. The brain is secondary to consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, what a loss. I mean, that was 1979 when he passed. Who knows what he would have done?
Oh my, I know. I know.
Mm.
I often wonder if there was some part of a grander scheme that he was introducing things that humanity wasn't quite ready for yet, so they called him home. I just, you wonder about things like that. Maybe I should ask him personally. It never occurred to me to try to connect with him.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have a 3-minute break coming up right now. So while we're on that break, see if you can tune in.
That would be
Okay, we'll
fun.
be back with more from Suzanne Geisemann after this break. Stay tuned.
OMTimes TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting OMTimes Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit Sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Suzanne, did you have any connection then during the break?
I actually didn't try because I would need to be in a nice expanded state of consciousness, and I'm just totally I'm hyped up right now. But what I have learned, Sandie, is everyone is here always, because there is only here in consciousness. They don't come from somewhere far away. So with that intention and the right state of consciousness, if it serves the greater good, we'll connect. So I will give it a go in a nice deep meditation and let you know how it goes.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
So book number 6, The Infinite Way by Joel Goldsmith, published in 1947. You have a powerful story to tell about the role that this book played in your life.
Do I ever? I found Joel Goldsmith when I was reading a lot of spiritual books about the higher power. I probably picked him up in a Unity Church bookstore somewhere. He has a vast library. And I love how he calls this life a parenthesis in eternity. So I relate to his philosophy and his understanding. And The Infinite Way was his smallest book, and I read it some time back. And like always, I highlight books as I read. Well, fast forward 5 years, and I had an experience where I asked if we can connect with anyone. I'd like to try to connect with Jesus, because he was not part of my life growing up. And I would really like to believe that this is him. So when I actually felt this presence, this incredible loving presence merge with me, it was like nothing I'd ever felt. The love was overwhelming. And I said, I need evidence. So you can even put Jesus to the test, right? I need you to tell me something I couldn't possibly know. Give me a Bible verse that is relevant to you being here right now. And it was the perfect test, Sandie, because I'm not familiar with the Bible, having not been raised reading it. All of a sudden in my head, Thessalonians 2:13. I had to say to my husband a couple minutes later, what is Thessalonians? I didn't even know it was out of the Bible. And it turned out to be so relevant about trusting the Spirit when you feel it in your heart. The next day, this same presence descended upon me and without asking gave me another Bible verse that was pretty much the same message, but from 1 Corinthians 2:14. And I can state these offhand now, but to rattle off numbers, chapters, and verse was so outside my whole BS, belief system, right? And so that's my term for BS, belief system. So those two verses became very sacred to me. I went and looked up how many verses are there in the Bible because they were so relevant. There are 33,000. And I started opening at random, and so many would have been irrelevant. So this was a really beautiful experience for me to validate that you ask to speak to Jesus or higher beings and masters. When your heart is pure, they will come to you, to any of us. Well, a few months later, I was getting ready to get on the road, and I heard this voice, I didn't know who it was, say, get Joel Goldsmith's little book. And I'll cut to the chase. I was guided step by step to start at the beginning of the book and read page by page, not just the parts I'd highlighted. And they're little pages, so it didn't take me long to get to page 27. And there was that one Bible verse, but there were no quotation marks. He just paraphrased it. There was no reference to a Bible verse, no word of Thessalonians or Corinthians. 2 pages later, another familiar phrase. I said, could that possibly be that other phrase? It was not annotated. I had not highlighted it. Yes, 5 years earlier, I read those words, but they meant nothing to me. I highlighted other pages. I Googled the two phrases, and when it popped up to be Thessalonians 2:13 and 1 Corinthians 2:14, the exact two verses, and I was led to that book by a higher being, it absolutely changed my entire worldview and my view of God. I knew there is a God, a higher power, a source. Everything I'd read about the field, everything about making miracles, all came down to this knowing from that incident with Joel Goldsmith's little book that we are being guided moment by moment. So his writing can be a little heavy, a little biblical at times, but not overtly. His writing is a little archaic, but I have a copy right over here beside me. I have another copy downstairs. I don't even have to open it to recreate that sacred moment when I came to know we're part of this web.
Book number 7, The Way of Mastery by Shanti Christo Foundation, published in 2012. There's actually 3 books here, aren't there? There's Part 1, The Way of the Heart, Part 2, The Way of Transformation, and Part 3, The Way of Knowing. So tell us about this book and what it meant to you.
Yes, Bill, along this path that these books have been taking me on, I discovered I'm a medium, and I started doing readings. And of course, you start with friends and neighbors, but I was doing so well that the neighbors are recommending neighbors, and now I have a waiting list way back when I first started, 2009. And this one woman came for a reading, and her name was Donna Kelly. She was one of my very first clients, and her reading went so well that she started recommending me to friends. And they would come and they'd show up, and I'd say, how'd you hear about me? Well, I'm a friend of Donna Kelly, who just passed last year. So Donna, thank you for starting me on this path. Well, all these women, what they had in common was they were part of a book study group solely devoted to reading and discussing and studying the Way of Mastery. So I got the book, and at the time it was an investment for me. It cost $50 at the time. It's now down a bit, but big, heavy book. And I started reading it, and I said, these words are the same words I'm getting when I channel my guides. So it must have been after 2009 because I started channeling in 2010. But words carry the energy of the author. No matter who the author is, whoever the source is, there's all one source, of course. But this book was channeled by a man named John Mark Hammer, and he was channeling, allegedly, the words of Jesus. Well, I'd had this experience, and I just knew that this can be trusted. And so I don't know that I learned anything new in the book, but to me, I go back to it to this day just for that beautiful feeling that I get in meditation. But sometimes I can't just meditate because of what's going on around me. I can open up that book just before going to bed and just soak up that beautiful energy. It's truth. And I've recommended that book to people over the years when they're really close to understanding, to knowing who we really are as expressions of one source. It's just a very special book.
It has come up before on people's lists, not, lots and lots of times, but it has come up. And whoever it touches, it seems to touch very, very deeply.
It's very much like A Course in Miracles, but some people have trouble with the language in A Course in Miracles, and this is more clear. Yeah.
So, book number 8, I Am That, Talks with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, 1973, one of the greatest sages of India.
Yeah, I'm just proud I can even say Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Right? You did very well there. I've shared it with other people and they said, say what? But he was brilliant, man, very humble, lived in an old tenement building in India, but people would come from all over the world to just ask him questions. And that's what this book is. It's a compilation of the conversations he had with people who came to him. But the answer to every question leads to the same answer. I am this. And what is this? Consciousness, oneness. But it is so deep, this book, Sandie. And the way I found it was through Donna Kelly, the woman that led me to The Way of Mastery. She ultimately invited me to join a small circle of 12 women who met weekly at her house. And we would meditate together for 45 minutes, which was beautiful. And then we had a book. And that was the book they were studying when I first joined them. And we would read it aloud. We were supposed to read it on our own at home beforehand and then read it page by page. You'd read a few paragraphs and stop, and the next person would pick up. And this is a thick book. And some of the material is really obscure. And I'll tell you, so many times we would stop reading and there would be this pause and we'd look at each other and we would say, does anybody know what he just said there? Because we did, and it just went right over our heads at the beginning. But I caught on very quickly. It's really just all coming back to getting rid of the story of you, setting that aside. And when you don't have a story, what remains? Pure being. Now I can pick it up, and I do pick it up often. And I just read little gems here and there and say, yep, that's truth. That's truth. So it's not something that you just plow through. And it's easy to set aside because it's so deep and you just think, I'm not getting this. But when you stay with it, which that book group caused us to do, it really pays off, because by the end, all of us were really be caught on. Whether it sinks into your awareness, that depends on where you are in your spiritual journey.
Yeah. And ain't that the truth about all of it?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what the thing is about these book lists. People have asked me over the years, what's your recommended book list? And I have hesitated to give it because they may go spend all this money and buy my 10 books and they might fall flat for them. They have to just look at that list and ask from the heart within, which of these books is perfect for me now? And you'll know. It'll do what I call snag you. And then where do you go from there? It may be to another author on your list. It's don't follow anybody else's path step by step. Just see what speaks to you in this moment. And then where does spirit lead you, knowing what you need next? I love learning through books that way. I usually have 5 books on the go on my nightstand, and I'll ask spirit every time, which book right now? And I'll open it up, and there will be word for word what came through in the morning messages that I share with the world. It's so affirming.
Yes.
Yeah.
So book number 9, this one, interesting, has come up probably about 3 times in the last 2 months.
Oh, wow.
And it is My Big Toe by the nuclear physicist Thomas Campbell, who spent years working with Robert Monroe. And it is, again, a trilogy, really, a 3-part book, Awakening, Discovery, and Inner Workings, all published in 2003. And the toe is not his literal toe.
That's right.
Tell us what it is.
It's my theory of everything. So he brings together philosophy, science, cosmology, religion. I was so grateful that a few times in the book, this nuclear physicist does use the word love. He really does get it, that the basis of everything is utter, total connection, wholeness, oneness. But he gives scientific and computer virtual reality type acronyms to everything. God is not God, it's the big computer, the ultimate, the absolute. And he really does liken all of this to a virtual reality. And it's brilliant the way he describes all of this. So whether you call this a virtual reality or a dream, I don't like when people use the word illusion, because it's very real to us, especially those of us who are suffering the passing of a loved one, but it's not the only reality. The illusion is when you think it's the only reality. And so Thomas Campbell is funny, but in a scientific, funny kind of way. The book is, there are some sections you can tell where I skipped over them because there's no highlighting. It's like, this is a little too deep. I don't need that. Let's get to the stuff that's really going to help me on my spiritual path and understanding more how all this works and why we can all connect with a greater reality and why we make the choices we do. And do we have free will? All of that's in this trilogy. Again, it's a trilogy of books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So book number 10, by somebody who really should be celebrated. I mean, she is, and I'm glad that she is, but she should be celebrated more, because I think that she has given us one of the most down-to-earth, practical ways of working through our stuff. And it is Byron Katie, and the book is 1,000 Names for Joy, Living in Harmony with the Way Things Are, published in 2007.
I love Byron Katie's work, even though I found it very frustrating at first. All of her books come down to doing what she calls the work, where you ask 4 questions. And the first one is, whatever has upset you, is it true? And at first you say, well, of course it's true. Of course my dog ate my homework and I'm upset. Of course it's true. It really causes discord within you. And that's always a gift if you're willing to look at it. And she shows you how to look at things a different way and find peace. I trust her because she had a complete break with reality, which allowed her to see, we are not these stories. We are not these bodies. We are this. I am that. She had a visceral experience of it and had to learn how to be human again and act in a body. And the 1,000 Names for Joy is great because I now call God Joy and Source. I use different names, but Joy is my go-to name. There's a pillow behind me here. It has Joy on it, and Joy's up here. I call us Joy Us. We're all joy and expression. But this is a beautiful book to pick up and put down when you just need a reminder of that, or want to bask in that beautiful energy of knowing I am this joy. Her husband, Stephen Mitchell, wonderful author in his own right, would give her a phrase out of the Tao Te Ching and say, what do you feel about that, Katie? They call her name's Byron Katie, but everybody calls her Katie. And what are your thoughts on this? And so they're just ad hoc reflections that just flowed from her as she is in that expanded state that she's always in. She's seeing from that higher perspective. So this book shows you how to see the ups and downs of being human from a higher perspective. And when you just read one after another and pick it up here and there, it shifts the way we all see reality. And boy, do we need to do that. My teaching of the Awakened Way is all to help us understand you shift to a higher state of consciousness, not a different place, but the soul's awareness, and that changes everything. So all of these authors have brought me to this awareness, and just such a beautiful, joyous life.
Yeah. I saw Byron Katie a few times when I lived in America. I attended some of the free afternoon sessions that she would give as she toured around the country. And it was so interesting to watch people go up on that stage convinced of the truth of a problem that they had that was causing them great distress, and then watch them walk away about 20 minutes later as if the world had been lifted off their shoulders.
Oh, you're reminding me right now of one where this woman got on the stage and was just couldn't stand the current, whoever at that time the acting president was, and just was so filled with rage and hate and anger and upset. And by the end of like 15 minutes of working with Katie, she had to admit he's not that bad. And the whole audience was laughing because she could not have imagined that. And boy, does everybody need a dose of Byron Katie in this world, no matter if it's over your political views or anything. We just need that shift in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know her work, and I can't imagine there's many people, but you never know, go and check out thework.org and have a look at that. And there's lots of free things to play with there. Talk about shift your perceptions. Okay, so that is the end of your 10 best list. Tell me what you're reading now.
Oh my gosh, what am I reading now? I haven't read in several days because I'm preparing for a new class with the Shift Network. So what am I reading? Oh, I'm rereading The Third Jesus with Deepak Chopra. I always love his work as well. I was surprised he didn't get on my 10 best list because I've read almost, no, he has so many books. I haven't read everything he's read, but quite dozens of his books. What else is on my table? Mostly rereading books. I can see the cover of one right now, but I'm just a complete blank. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about, you've been recognized on the Watkins List of the 100 most spiritually influential living people. How do you feel about that when you think back, to what you were doing 30 odd years ago?
It is so humbling. Yet it's such an honor. What I love about that is if it helps me bring this work, the Awaken Way, to more people, what an honor that is. I can't tell you, Sandie, the number of people who come up to me and say that my work literally saved their life. Because I deal with a lot of people who are grieving and they want to join their loved ones across the veil. They're ready to take their own life. And then they just start watching my YouTube videos or looking at some of my work. I have a lot of free material on my website, and it shifts something and it gives them hope. So that list has helped me, just shows actually that I'm right on mission, right? Reach as many people with the messages of hope. My goal is to take people from an emptiness that can't be filled to a fullness that can't be contained. That's the phrase that I use because that's how I feel most of the time. I tell people I'm so overflowing with love for everyone. I just want to spew it all over, which does not create a great visual, but I never felt like this before I awakened to who we really are. But once you allow yourself to feel that and realize this is not the only world, your world changes.
Yeah. Do you look back on yourself, your younger self, and think, how come I didn't know any of this, that this was going to be my life path?
I know why I didn't know, because I would not have been the military officer I was. I would not have been picked by the chairman to be his aide. And that has been one of the key points that has brought people to my work, my very left-brain, structured, high visibility background. So if I had known, I would have been a different person. And I just trust, and I hope everybody trusts, that everybody's path unfolds perfectly. And when you can look back and see that even the most challenging, devastating parts, like the death of my stepdaughter, lead to growth and evolution, not just for ourselves, but to the whole that we're a part of, then the gratitude just flows.
Yeah. Tell me about the Evolutionary Leaders Circle that you're a member of, and you're also part of the humanities team. I mean, what are these organizations doing?
They are people from diverse backgrounds who are all aware of the concept of oneness, that at a deeper level, we're all joined by one conscious mind, one source. And so we all come together, and working together help more people around the globe to understand we need to work together to shift consciousness, to understand oneness. Many of the people in the Evolutionary Leaders group, which is by invitation only, are part of Humanity's Team, which is the most fabulous platform for learning about oneness and consciousness, a nonprofit organization. And I have an upcoming master class with them, my second, this summer it will come out. And they and the evolutionary leaders really work from the heart. It's not about profit at all. It's not about money or numbers even, but the numbers are important. We need to get to that tipping point by getting more people to understand it's not me against you and us versus them. It's joyous unity, right?
So tell us about the Awakened Way. You've got an app. You send out lots of inspirational messages. What is the Awakened Way?
And the Awakened Way app, it has daily messages that I get from my guide, fantastic for inspiration and helping to share the awakened way of living, which is simply an understanding of three basic principles: that we're not only human, and my work has really shown that to me. We are also and primarily souls. And number two, you're part of one big web connecting all that is, and that web has shown itself just in this 1 hour together. And the third one, that the creative healing force of the universe is love. Not human love, but this total lack of separation. That's my definition of love. When you just know that we're all connected at a deeper level. When you abide by those principles, when you trust all of that to be true, it becomes your experience. And then you live what I call a consciously connected and divinely guided life. And it's just a wondrous way to live. Like you said, when I look back on the way I used to be, craving food, running to the refrigerator, down on myself, up and down moods all the time, judging other people, comparing myself, not feeling good enough, all those human things that are so common to all of us when we think we're only human. Compared to now, I just want everybody to find the peace that comes from living this way. Suffering really does not have to happen.
Yeah.
Pain is part of life, but suffering does not have to last.
Yeah. So 13 books and 6 best-selling hemi-sync recordings. Tell us about those recordings. Are they meditations?
Most of them are, but some of my recordings you can even listen to in the car, but not recommended. They have binaural beats on them. If you listen with headphones, they bring your brain rapidly into a synchronized state that creates a frequency that's optimal for meditation. So people that use them, if anybody just has to read the reviews, say, oh my gosh, I've been meditating for years and I never experienced that kind of an expanded state. All of the scripts that I narrate to this special music with the binaural beats were given to me, channeled from my guides. So the hemi-sync company never changed a single word in my script because it was just literally divine. And it's a wonderful meditative tool. I have a series that helps people learn to connect across the veil, whether for mediumship for others or connecting with your own loved ones. And then I have a Tools for Awakening series that is just designed to help you really experience your higher self. Yeah.
Have you spent time at the Monroe Institute yourself?
I did. I have been a guest trainer, an outside trainer for them for several years, multiple occasions, just like Tom Campbell, who wrote My Big Toe. When I read that book, I had no idea that just like him, I would be teaching there. And I love their work at the Monroe Institute.
Yeah, me too. And I love hemi-sync as well. Suzanne, when we started this conversation talking about 9/11, the experiences you had then, the belief systems that you had then, or lack thereof,
Right.
What you must have been thinking at that incredibly impactful time. Looking back now, have you changed the way you view that incident? You know,
Oh, completely,
your
completely.
connections.
Yes. Yes. There are two major points here that raises. Number one is, at the time I had no tools to deal with the grief and the desperation that we all felt. I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I had nothing religious or spiritual to fall back on. And now I have so many tools that I can get knocked off balance by normal human things. I'm certain my life is certainly not perfect, but the tools just instantly bring me back to peace. And that's what I love sharing with people. Back then, it was just horrible. Literally ran away, retired from the Navy and went sailing off into the sunset. And then Susan passed, and it's like Spirit saying, you can't run away. You need to learn these tools. We're here for you. But the second thing about 9/11 is, back then, you think, oh, that's pure evil. These people are, and you say all these human adjectives. And now I understand that hurt people, that people who are completely blinded to the light within are the ones that do evil acts and hurt others. And so I look upon terrorists or anybody who hurts other people, and I have compassion, which is such a different feeling than hatred. And that's the difference between fighting darkness with darkness and bringing the light into the darkness. So the practical side of the Navy commander is still here. We don't overlook things. We don't condone it. But I just come at things from a different angle, even though there's this practical part that says we just need to make sure that doesn't happen again. But in the meantime, let's bring the light in.
Yeah. Hard one for people to really get hold of and learn to live, but very important.
And the biggest key, Sandie, now I know, is understanding. What is that? I'm so sorry. Little alarm going off there. The biggest key is realizing that all of this pain happens within the human story. And that's where the awakened way, you are not only human, key is key. So what do? You shift your state of consciousness to that of the soul, which is beyond the story. And there's the peace, and there's the higher perspective. And that's where you access what is the best way to deal with this now. And it's always going to be higher than the normal human response. So that shift is what changes everything.
Yeah, indeed. So tell us what people will find at your website. I know you've got a lot of free stuff there, and what you're offering.
Yes. If they go to the homepage, go down to the bottom. There's a fun video that plays right at the top. It just kind of shows me laughing at things. I'm just my enthusiasm kind of bubbling over there at the top. But if you scroll down, you'll see where we can meet in person and online, upcoming events. But at the bottom is a free e-guide. Where do I begin? Because I have so many resources on my website. So many people say, I don't know. There's so much here. So it's like a little buffet menu. Are you in grief? Start here. Are you on the spiritual path without having lost somebody? Start here. And I'm just so honored to be able to offer so many resources that people are really finding helpful.
Are you still doing private, personal, medium readings?
I do, but probably only 5 a week. I only do 1 a day, and on the days that I can. And I'm working through a waiting list that people have been on for 5 years. So I'm not adding to the list. But I have to keep doing readings because I love them, keeps the connection crystal clear, and provides me fresh examples all the time that this is real. Just real quick, like just the last reading I did, a woman, mother in spirit, came through. My client is in Singapore. We're using Zoom. And I said, your mother's handing you flowers. I'm asking her what kind they are. I can see them, but I don't know what this is. And the mother says they're frangipani. I said, what is that word? I mean, I'd heard it, but I didn't know what it was. And I said, I know this is meaningful to you because your mother's giving them to you and says, I want you to keep these around the house. And my client said, they're very common flowers in Singapore. So there you go. Fresh teaching to show I couldn't have known this. The spirit world is real. Her mom was not dead and gone. She's right here, just as everyone's loved ones are. And they just want us to know it.
Okay, well, if there's one last message that you could share with the people watching this and listening to this, what would you want to say?
There are so many messages, but what comes as I tune in right now is you are not alone and you are not broken. Maybe at the human level, you may feel that way, but your soul is perfectly whole and complete right now. Set the intention from your heart to know your true nature and get ready for miracles.
Beautiful. Suzanne Geisemann, thank you so much for adding your 10 best list to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Oh, thank you, Sandie. This is just fun, and I love that you took me down memory lane personally. It's been great.
It's been a lot of fun. If you want more information about Suzanne, you can visit her website, Suzanne, S-U-Z. I'm British, so I'll say Z, ANNEGIESEMANN.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it right. .com. That's it for this week. We'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of the 10 Best Spiritual Books interview series for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you to Suzanne Geisemann.
Thank you.